First of all, good morning. I'd like to start with my thesis presentation. Okay, so if you work in a creative industry, ideas are your product, right? We all know that good ideas lead to success, and we also know that bad ideas lead to failure, right? Therefore, you better make sure that your ideas are good, right? This is very important. Is this possible? How can you do this? Well, if you want to make sure your ideas are good, you have to first understand inspiration. How does it work? Where does it come from? And why do we need it? Okay? So let's start with the last question. Why do we need inspiration? Well, it's very obvious. We need inspiration to produce ideas. It's very simple. James Webb used to say, an idea is nothing more nor less than a new combination of pre-existing elements. Remember this guy? We met him in Japan. Goichi Suda was the one that was involved with the video game industry. He provided a very good example about this. He said when he was creating a new video game, his inspiration came from the movie industry. First was the movie El Topo by Alejandro Jodorowsky, because this movie is about dual fight, one-on-one fighting. He also was inspired by Star Wars, the lightsaber, and the character was inspired on Johnny Knoxville. So at the end you have a new combination, you have a new video game, No More Heroes. You can see the character looks almost exactly the same as Johnny Knoxville. He has a lightsaber, and all of the story in this video game is about dual fighting. So this is how it works in a very basic level. So as we can conclude that inspiration is essential to creativity, of course, but also is essential to business. This is very important. Andy Stefanovich, the founder of Play, my company in the US, says the following: if you're not feeding your employees with new inputs, you cannot expect new outputs. This is very important. Companies all around the world are expecting their employees to come up with ideas and innovation, but it seems like it's a corporate responsibility to provide them with new inputs. Otherwise, they won't be able to do it. So, there's a company that does this very well. It's called El Bulli. We all know this case. El Bulli is the best restaurant in the world, and what they do actually to provide new inputs is they close 3 months each year. So every time they close, they put a creative team together and they start attending courses of different disciplines, start visiting designers from other industries, and they visit even other countries. These last 3 months. After this, they come back to El Bulli and start working on the new menu. So this is how it works. You should first have new inputs and then start developing ideas. Ferrat Adrià says, ideas are the only thing that cannot be explained, but you can create methods to make them flow. So, if you want to make ideas flow, we shouldn't wait for inspiration to strike us. My idea is that we should be able to produce inspiration on demand. So every time you need to come up with a new idea, you should be able to produce inspiration, not just be sitting waiting for it. Okay? So, is this possible? Well, it is. It is if you know where inspiration comes from. So this is the main topic of my thesis. I call it the 4 sources of inspiration. This is the framework that I built for this. I discovered it while I was doing it. So how this works? It always starts with a creative task. You have to define a creative task. You have to have a goal or an objective. And then the 4 sources are, the first one I call it voices. The second source is your industry. Third one, other industries. And the fourth one is other disciplines. So let me explain each of one of them. First, voices. Well, the first source of inspiration is about exploring different points of view. Let me give you an example. There's a laboratory called the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge, and a number of the most prominent scientists of the 20th century work there. So here's a picture, and the guy who discovered the electron worked there, Ernest Rutherford, etc. So most of the Nobel Prizes have come from here. So what is so special about this laboratory? What is so special about Cavendish? Well, it has a canteen. This is serious, I'm not joking. The director of the Cavendish Laboratory says the following: experience had taught me that laboratories often fail because the scientists never talk to each other. To stimulate the exchange of ideas, we built a canteen where people can chat at morning coffee, lunch, and tea. So there you go, very important. Voices are the first source of inspiration. What kind of voices should you explore? Well, it depends on the creative task, but the very basic ones are the following voices. You have to talk to end users, you have to talk to your clients, suppliers, your employees, opinion shapers, experts, and scholars. That's the first source of inspiration. Second source is your industry. The source is about spotting opportunities by exploring your own industry. Let me give you an example. We all know this very well. Bernbach explored the American car industry. He spotted some opportunities there, and he focused on what actually made the Beetle different to the other American cars. Came up with a very, very nice idea. Think small. The inspiration for this piece actually came from the very car industry. So sometimes if you explore the industry you're working on, or even your product or your brand, you can also get inspiration. So the second source, very important, is your industry. You should look into your company, your brands, your competitors, distribution channels, and industry trends in this second source of inspiration. The third one is very important, and most of the companies I know fail to do this. They're very good at listening to voices. They do some research, listen to consumers. They're also very good at knowing and analyzing their own industry, but they almost never make the time or the effort to look at other industries. So this is very important because, as we know, light bulbs weren't invented by exploring candles, right? Iron ships weren't invented by exploring wood boats, and Walkmans weren't invented by exploring turntables. In other words, like a philosopher used to say, begin with another's to end with your own. This is very important. The third source of inspiration is about exploring other industries. Here's an example. There's a company called Better Place. They build electric cars, but the inspiration came from the cell phone business. So why the cell phone business? Very simple. In the cell phone business, you pay very little for the phone itself, but you're buying talk time on their network, right? Same thing here. Here you get a car for a cheap price, or sometimes nothing. You can get it for free, but you pay to plug into their grid. So now you're buying miles, not minutes. So this is very important. Actually, the business model came not from the car industry, came from the cell phone industry. You have to explore other industries. The basic ones are here. I'm not going to mention them all, because there are a lot. And finally, the fourth source of inspiration is about exploring other disciplines. Ralph Lauren used to say the following: I could look at Ernest Hemingway and be inspired to do a whole collection. This is very true. Let me give you an example. There was a fight in 1962, Floyd Patterson against Sonny Liston, and this fight was scheduled 1 week after the launch of the October issue of Esquire magazine. So George Lewis got an idea for the cover of the magazine. He said, okay, I created a surrealistic image of defeat using a Floyd Patterson look-alike of how the world treats a loser. It was a very famous cover, maybe you've seen it before, but the inspiration came from art, another totally different discipline. There's a picture called The Toreador by Edouard Manet, and George Lewis says that he got the inspiration from this picture to develop that cover. He says, both images, the Toreador and the pugilist, are of courageous men whose livelihood is to fight for their very lives. So there you go. Other disciplines are the fourth source of inspiration. You can take a look at art, humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, formal sciences, professional and applied sciences. So there you go. These are my four sources of inspiration. Sounds great, but do they work? Well, I didn't know that, so I have to test them. Alright, so I make a test. What I did was very simple. I asked a bunch of people to come up with ideas for the same creative task. I chose a very general and common to everyone creative task, which was the following: ideas to improve the experience of going to a restaurant. You know, everyone has gone to a restaurant, so it's fair for everyone to solve this creative task. What's the catch? Well, I divide people in two sessions. Session A, they develop the task without any inspiration at all. People from session B had the four sources of inspiration provided by me. At the end of each session, also the participant responded a questionnaire, so I can check the development of the 4 sources of inspiration with them. Furthermore, I divided each session in different teams. I had one team from creative industries, so these people that work in creative industry. There was a designer, there was people from advertising agencies, and also from the movie agency industry. People from traditional industries, lawyers, finance guy, accountants, right? And people from college. The same in session B, so I can compare creative industries, traditional industries, and college students. So the task was clear. You have ideas to improve the experience of going to a restaurant. Next step is to build the inspiration around this task so I can test it. So I'm going to show you a few examples of how I build inspiration for this specific task. The voices inspiration. Remember, voices is about personal experience, so it was very simple. Just first step was, okay, talk about what you dislike the most about the experience of going to a restaurant. Very simple. Step 2, make a list of the dislikes you just talked about. Step 3, come up with ideas to solve these issues. So this very simple exercise lasted just for 15 minutes, and people went through these 3 steps and started developing ideas after. When they finished developing ideas from this source, we moved on to the second one, and I said to them, okay, I'm going to show you some creative solutions from the restaurant industry. Your job is very simple. You just have to borrow some ideas from these examples. First example is a restaurant in the Netherlands where you can pay as much as you wish at the end. So there are no prices in the menu. You can just pay whatever you like at the end. This is a creative solution. Another example is a restaurant in the UK where all the tables have touch screen technology, so you can play games with the people you're dining, you can listen to music, you can watch movies, you can look at the menu at the table. Very interesting. And the third one is a restaurant in Brussels, in Belgium, where the restaurant has the best view in town. You dine like 60 feet above ground. So these are creative solutions from the restaurant industry. So everyone borrow ideas from these examples, and after that, the second step is, okay, just create ideas by combining what you borrowed in a new way. Really simple. The third source was pretty much the same, but the examples are different. You have to spot and borrow the big idea from the following creative solutions. The first one that I showed was this. This is a company that gives away designer dresses for rent, so this way you don't have to have a whole wardrobe of designer dresses. Toyota made a partnership with Hertz. If you want to buy a Toyota and you want to try the car before you buy it, you can have it for a whole day for free. This is a nice idea. And last, well, this is an idea of how to reduce water waste by using the sink's water waste for the toilet. So I show them this has nothing to do, is not related to the creative task at all. This is about other industries. Finally, they created ideas by combining what they borrowed in a new way. And last, other disciplines, well, I just told them, okay, choose a magazine. So I provided the following magazine. There was magazines from the discipline of art, design, architecture, health, Scientific America. Second step, borrow whatever you find inspiring. So here's a sample of what they borrowed. They just ripped the magazines. And step 3, create ideas by combining what you borrow in a new way. So this was only lasted this session. The 4 sources only lasted for 1 hour. So remember, people from session A didn't have any inspiration at all, but people from session B, I showed them this inspiration. So, the moment of truth, who did better? The first thing we're going to look at is the quantity of ideas. You might think that quantity is not very important, but there's an author called Gary Hamil that says that there's a math to innovation. If you want to have a big innovation in the market, first you have to develop 1,000 possibilities. Then you look at those 1,000 possibilities, and maybe 100 are good, and maybe 10 are worth testing, and maybe just one hits the market and is successful. So it's very important to have quantity of ideas. What are the results? Well, as you can see, it's 40 to 76. People from session B outperform people from session A by double. If you double click and look at the performance of the teams, every team in session B beat every team in session A. So this is very, very important. Inspiration definitely helps you to produce more ideas. One other comment is that notice that the team that did worst is people from creative industries. So this is like funny. But I also talked to them after the experiment, and I asked them, well, what happened? And they say, okay, when you don't have inspiration, you don't have a common starting point to work. The only thing you have is your previous experience. So most of the time, instead of creating ideas, they were just arguing which experience was the best. So that's why they lost a lot of time developing ideas. So inspiration provides a common starting point. That's one of the best benefits of it. But let's move on to quality of ideas. This is important. So in order to judge the quality, I didn't want to judge it myself because it's not fair. I already knew what I was expecting, so I call judges, outside judges. I have 3 innovation consultants to judge the ideas, the experts. I also recruit restaurant managers, and I also recruit restaurant customers. So they all look at every idea from all teams, but they didn't know how was the process to create them. So what was the criteria I provide them? Ideas should be attractive. So attractiveness means that an idea gets your attention. Simple as that. Relevance means that an idea serves a real need. Differentiation means that it has to be unique. And feasibility means that it has to be doable. Right? So you have these 4 criteria. The rating system was very simple. They just have to choose for each criteria low, medium, or high. So the best ideas would have scored high on everything. And what I did is I just average the results for each idea to see which were the winning ideas. So let's take a look at the number of highly rated ideas for each criteria, shall we? Okay. First criteria, attractiveness, was 30 to 60. Relevance, 26 to 39. Differentiation, 23 to 55. And feasibility, 16 to 33. As you can see, in almost every criteria, they also double the performance from people of session A. But something interesting came out of this analysis. Notice that the difference in relevance is the shorter one. So one other conclusion that I got is inspiration helps to produce relevant ideas, but relevance is not triggered by inspiration, it's triggered by intuition. It's a very different thing. So you also need personal intuition to produce relevant ideas. You also need consumer knowledge to produce relevant ideas. But even so, relevance is also triggered by inspiration. If you double click at this information and take a look at the team's performance, you can see Team 2V were very good at these creative sessions. Something interesting happened. Notice that Team B is the first in every criteria but in feasibility. So clearly they were not thinking about feasibility at all when they created ideas. So if you don't think about feasibility during the creative process, it helps produce more ideas and it helps you to get more ideas in the other criteria. On the other hand, people 1 and 3B, they score higher on feasibility but lower in the other criteria. So this means that they were thinking of feasibility. So that is why they reduced the number of highly rated ideas in the other. So the main advice here is during the creative process, don't think of feasibility. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you'll end up with highly feasible ideas anyway. And there's also another way to look at the data. Look at it by source of inspiration. So attractiveness, you have the 4 sources, number of highly rated ideas by source of inspiration, relevance, differentiation, and feasibility. Notice that every time the third source of inspiration is the winner, remember other industries, in every criteria is number 1. So you can say that is like the climax of the creative process when you're using the 4 sources of inspiration. This doesn't mean that you can only use this source of inspiration. It doesn't work that way. You have to go through the whole sequence, as I'll talk about this later. And also, notice that for relevance and feasibility, the first source of inspiration, voices, is very important. Why? Because voices comes from personal experience. So if you want to have relevant ideas, you have to listen to people's point of view. And also, if you want to have feasible ideas, you also have to rely on personal experience. And in differentiation, we have other disciplines. If you notice, other disciplines is the hardest source of inspiration to connect, because the connection between the creative task and other disciplines is longer. So that's why it's is more difficult. But the most differentiated ideas come from this source of inspiration. So it's very, very important to have this as well. So now let's talk about winning ideas. This is the most important thing. Ideas that scored high on every criteria. Okay? Was 2 against 9. Team 1A and Team 2A didn't get any winning ideas at all. Once again, Team 2B was the winner. Then the college students, and then the creatives and the college students from session A were tied with 2. So we can conclude that the 4 sources of inspiration increase the number of ideas by 300%. So imagine, this is a huge competitive advantage if you are in any creative field. If you receive a brief and you're in a pitch, imagine that you increase your chance of winning that pitch by 300%. There's a huge competitive advantage if you just take the time to look at the inspiration before producing the ideas. Also, without these 4 sources of inspiration, there is a 66% chance you end up with no winning ideas at all. So, people from Team 1A and Team 2A, they just wasted their time, basically. Every source of inspiration produces at least one winning idea. So it's very important to have the 4 of them. So, then I went a little bit further and I said, okay, this should be a framework that anyone can use. So I made some tips of how to use these 4 sources of inspiration. First, the creative task. You have to write down the creative task clearly. It should fit in one sentence. Okay, if this is wrong, nothing will work. You have to have a very clear creative task. Then you have to have a conversation with three different people. 3 is enough. If you have more time, it's okay. 6, 10, that's okay, but 3 is enough. You have to explore 3 creative solutions that are closely related to the creative task. This is very important. When you're exploring your industry, those creative solutions are like benchmark. They have to be closely related to the task. But 3 is enough. I also found out that if you show them a lot of examples of inspiration, you overload them. So that's not good either. So 12 is a good number. That's why other industries also 3 creative solutions, but it doesn't matter if they're related to a creative task or not. It doesn't matter. It can even be random if you want. And to explore other disciplines, the easiest thing to do is to use magazines. You're not going to send them to study a discipline just for a creative process. Just use magazines of different disciplines and that's it. So, creativity is about connecting dots. Very important. Inspiration provides these dots. You have to follow the right sequence to connect these dots. This is very important. The right sequence is, first, you have to explore voices, then your industry, then other industries, and at the end, other disciplines. Why? If you start, for example, exploring other disciplines, the connection between the creative task and the inspiration you are borrowing is very long and it's very hard. Only few people can do this. The connection is shorter in other disciplines, but it's also quite far. And the first 2 sources are easier, because if you're exploring your industry, you already know a lot about it. And the one that is closest is the first source of inspiration. So everyone has experienced at least once the creative task they're working on. So you should start first with the voices, and then you move to your industry, then other industries, and after that other discipline. This way always the connection is short. This way always they can develop ideas. This is very, very important. Okay, so one last thought. If you work in a creative industries, ideas are your product, make sure to have the best raw material for these ideas. Use the 4 sources of inspiration. Thank you.